So this is an evening of Sema, listening. A Sufi practice of spending time soaking in music and in poetry, in this case storytelling also. And also an evening where we want to incorporate the traditional elements of serving tea and a small treat. And this is usually called considering the circle. The Sufi circle is called a halqa. And a halqa is a ring. So it's not just a circle. It literally means a ring. And it's to suggest that when people join in a circle like this for sacred ceremony, that they're bound in a relationship as in a marriage. That there's a covenant of trust between them, that something is being shared that is sacred and intimate. And so the circle that's formed is called a halqa. A Sufi group is called a halqa. And the ceremony of serving tea and food within that circle is called considering the circle. Taking it into consideration, being considerate toward another, and demonstrating that as a means of demonstrating the proper adab or etiquette for being with others in the world. And so the form is set here and demonstrated here. And so, courtesy of Evan and Alima in the kitchen, Alima has made tea for us and special cookies, and what we'll do is Alia will pour each cup and hand it to the person to her right, who will then turn and hand it to the person to their right, until each person is served in one cup after another, one cookie after another, until the circle is fully served and considered. And since it seems to have been an omission the last time I told this parable, the story of tea, that I omitted serving actual tea, I thought that I would tell the story again and let the parable sit with us throughout the listening. And then maybe at the end, if there's time and you've considered the story, maybe there'll be a little time to talk about it. So, if you'll start to pour some tea on. So this is a story or parable that is over 1,000 years old. It's good to know that before you hear it. It's not something I made up. It's been in the tradition this long. So it begins like this, that once there was a time when tea was unknown outside of China. It hadn't reached India, but word of this celestial or heavenly drink had made its way down the Silk Road and into the various kingdoms that the Silk Road connected. Thank you. And so in one kingdom called India, here, the king had heard tell of this celestial drink called tea, and he wanted to know if such a thing actually existed, or if it was just a rumor. Was there anything really called tea? And so he called his ministers and told them that they were going to be sent as an embassy into China to seek the permission of the emperor of China to taste for themselves this thing called tea. So the embassy leaves on the Silk Road and makes their way very quickly up into the heart of China, to the very gates of the forbidden city. And they're granted admittance, and even admittance to the very chambers of the emperor of China, because they're an embassy of a king. And so they come before the high throne of the Emperor of China, who sits looking down on them. And they say, "Your Radiant Highness, Son of Heaven, we're sent as ambassadors from the King of India because we've heard rumors of the celestial drink tea which is served at your palace. And we would like, with your permission, to taste this celestial drink for ourselves." Now, the great Emperor of China does not deign to speak to the lowly ministers of the tiny kingdom of India, but merely looks to one of his own ministers and gestures. And the embassy is taken into another antechamber, which is a great hall in itself, where there's a low table, and they're seated at this table, and something is brought out, cups. It's poured. And they're each served some cup of this drink called tea. And so the moment's finally arrived. They raise it to their lips and they drink. And just a smile emerges on their faces. And one of them says, "It's wonderful. It's both stimulating and calming at the same time. It's an amazing drink. It's truly the celestial drink." And so now, buoyed with their own success, full of it, flush with it, they decide that they rushed all the way up into the heart of China. Now they can take their time going back. They're successful, and they'll see the sights, the great Buddhist statue on the hill in this city, and they'll taste the local cuisine and spend a little time in China. And so they do, and they go for lunch in a particular roadhouse, that has a good reputation, and they wait to be served, and something is poured for them. They taste it, and to their surprise, it's tea. And then they start to look around the room, and a feeling of disquiet comes over them, because they realize everybody's drinking tea. And not just royalty like themselves, but peasants and merchants. Everybody's drinking tea. And they have a sinking feeling now. So they get up and they leave and they go to another roadhouse, and yet again, everybody's drinking tea. And so, feeling a little less flush with success now, they make their way back to the tiny kingdom of India along the Silk Road. And they come before the king of India, the king of here. And he says, "Well, were you successful?" And they say, "Yes, but what?" "Well, we were served something that was called tea, and it was wonderful. But we think perhaps they may have played a joke on us, or didn't think that we were worthy of drinking the actual tea, because we soon found that everybody drank it, peasants and royalty both. We don't think it was the real tea." Elsewhere, in a land called Anja, there was a great philosopher. Indeed, he was the greatest philosopher of the whole region. And his special subject, the subject that he loved most, to discuss most, and which he was the greatest expert on, was tea. And he was the greatest expert because all the people who passed through that region along the Silk Road, all the travelers along the Silk Road, he would stop them, bring them in, and ask them what they knew about tea. And so in this way, he gathered a great compendium of information on tea and became the greatest expert. And he learned all that there was to know. Some said it was a dry leaf. Some said it was a liquid. Some said it was bitter. Some said sweet. Some said it was greenish. Some said it was golden. All these different characteristics. And he wrote it down in a great treatise on the subject of tea. And in this way he became acclaimed as the greatest authority on tea. But he'd never tasted it. In another land called Mazhab, sectarianism, they'd actually managed to get a hold of a little bag of tea, a little sachet. And one day, each year, they would bring out this sacred bag of tea and tie 4 tiny strings to it, which they would suspend to 2 great staves, which 4 large, grim-faced men would put on their shoulders. And then they would carry this little bag of tea, suspended from these 4 thin strings, through the streets of the capital city. And as they processed, it was a holiday, so everybody came out from their homes, and nobody had to go to work. And as they came out, and the tea passed before them, everybody prostrated before the tea. So each year there was this great procession where the tea would be processed through the streets and everybody would bow down, until one year a visitor to the city came, and he came on this particular day, and he's watching this procession and watches as the tea passes before him, and everyone around him bows down and prostrates before the sacred bag of tea, until among them only he is standing. And he looks around and looks down at people and can't figure out what's going on, and looks at the tea, and he says, "No, you idiots, you have to pour boiling water on it." Audible gasp. The procession stops. The priests of the tea, the grim-faced priests of the tea, turn and stare at him, anger on their faces. And he's standing there, and they've heard what he said, and they turn and they point to the religious police, and the religious police come and grab the man, immediately take him off, and he's executed in the most horrible ways. Because he's a heretic. He's an enemy of religion. Pouring boiling water on it, he's suggesting the destruction of the tea that would ruin it. These fragile, dry bits of leaf, they'd be ruined, they'd be destroyed. How dare he suggest such a thing? Fortunately for us, he'd been visiting friends in the city, and he had confided the secret of tea to these few friends before this had happened. And before he was executed, thank God, he had given over his few possessions, including his own private stash of tea. Now the friends, they wanted to see what this was all about. They knew the secret of tea now, at least what he said was the secret of tea, and they wanted to try it for themselves. But they also knew that it's not smart to go around talking about infusing it. So they met in a back room with their boiling water and their cups, and they infused the tea in secret. And they tasted it, and their reaction was very much like the ministers of the tiny kingdom of India. It's wonderful. It's both stimulating and relaxing at the same time. It gives a person a really incredible feeling. What is that? And if anybody happened to pass the room where they were drinking the tea and somebody said, "What are you having there?" They would say, just a little medicine. And in this way, they met every Thursday each week. And Thursday after Thursday through the year and year after year, they carried out the ritual of drinking the tea. And in this way, year after year, they grew in wisdom, until the wisest among them said this: the one who tastes knows. The one who tastes not knows not. Stop talking about the celestial drink, but serve it at your banquets. Those who like it will ask for more. Those who do not are not fitted to be tea drinkers. Close the shop of argument and open the tea house of experience. In this way, these merchants of silks, merchants of fabrics and jewels, and pliers of trades all along the Silk Road became the first merchants of tea. And so now, wherever they would go along the Silk Road, with whatever it was that they were selling or whatever trade they were plying, when they came to the city that they had meant to arrive at, they would sit down, bring out a stool, boil a little water, take out their tea, and then share it with whoever might be passing. And this, we're told, is the origin of the chaikanas, the tea houses that then sprang up all over Central Asia, all along the Silk Road. And in this way, the message of the true use and wisdom of tea was spread far and wide. That's the parable of tea. I'll leave you to think about it for a while.